We haven't even started spring training games, and fans are already looking ahead to the month of April. A lot of questions on today's mailbag episode have to do with who should bat leadoff while Acuña is out. How do the Braves survive the first month of the season? I'll answer those questions and many more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there as well at _Braves. Follow us on Instagram at Locked On Braves. Submit any questions there to be answered as well. But on today's mailbag podcast, I'm going to answer the questions that you submitted to my post on X at Locked On _Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. And as always, if you're listening on the audio version, you can help me out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. It is our weekly mailbag episode. Got some questions to get to. We didn't get quite as many as we normally do, but that just gives us more time to talk about the questions that did get submitted. Probably about 10 to 12 questions on today's episode that we're going to answer. Wide variety of topics as usual, but a lot of them have to do with the early portion of the season. Who will bat leadoff? How do they survive the month of April? What happens in the rotation if Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson either don't work out or do work out? What all does that look like? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, let's jump into the questions. Like I said, not as many as we normally get, and that is okay. We're running out of time in the offseason. Everybody is adjusting, but we do have about 12 questions that we'll answer on today's episode. First one coming from PJ's Braves, who says, if Anderson and Holmes both pitch well, who gets to the pen when Strider returns? Or could it mean a 6-man rotation given Strider returning from injury? Anderson also and Holmes has more recently been a reliever. So you already answered the question, I think, or you have, in my opinion. And I briefly touched on this in yesterday's episode that came out last night, the conversation I had with Grant McCauley. And my solution for this, and the way I laid it out there is that, there is certainly a more pessimistic view where Grant Holmes can't cut it as a starter, Ian Anderson doesn't. This rotation could be in a world of trouble. But the optimistic view on that is, what if all the hype around Grant Holmes is real and that he can cut it as a starter and he can consistently go 5-6 innings in a start and give us 150 innings this year, and he just becomes a legitimate starter? Same thing the same way we feel about Ronaldo Lopez now. We weren't sure about Ronaldo Lopez going into last season, but he proved he can be a legitimate starter at the big league level. Really good one, as it was the case. So I think there's a possibility. What if Ian Anderson, the slider that he's mixing in now, if he can get some more fastball command, can he be a serviceable big league starter? And that's kind of what I talked about on the podcast with Grant as well. It's not a situation where it was several years ago where you needed Ian Anderson to be a solid number 3, number 2 type of starter in your rotation. Braves don't need that now. They just need Ian Anderson to give them 5 quality innings. And that's generally what he was good for. So can Ian Anderson be that? And if that is the case, and Grant Holmes can make that transition, that the swing and miss stuff that we saw from him last year, it is legitimate, and he can do it a second and third time through the order. He can do it the second, third time that he sees a team, and he is a starter, and Ian Anderson gets back on track. Maybe the development of that slider, a third pitch in there that we've always been looking for, other than the curveball, which I think isn't very effective pitch for him, and he doesn't throw a lot, but off of the fastball and the changeup that we know, at least the changeup is a really good pitch, but getting another good secondary in that slider kind of helps him, be more stabilized as a rotation piece, and Strider comes back, then I think you absolutely go to a 6-man rotation. I think at some point during this season, you are going to want to go to a 6-man rotation at some point. The problem that I always say with going to a 6-man rotation is it has to be 6 guys that you trust to give you 5 good innings. Otherwise, you're just going to blow up your bullpen. You might as well just go with an opener every so often. And maybe they do that as well at times because, look, these pitchers are going to get injured at some point. It's just It's the way of the game. And you're going to be needing some other people to step up. But at least at the beginning of the year, when you hope that there is some help, if Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson are both throwing the ball well and Spencer Strider comes back, I think you absolutely go to a 6-man rotation, because you are going to be looking for opportunities all throughout the year, just like they did last year, to make sure that they keep Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Schwellenbach, Strider coming back from injury. Holmes hasn't pitched as a starter in a while. Ian Anderson hasn't thrown a lot of innings in a while. There's a lot of guys in this rotation that they need to take it easy on this year. So they're going to be looking for those chances to give a guy an extra day of rest, go to a 6-man rotation, just like they did last year. So absolutely, for me, it's an easy call. If Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson are throwing the ball well, Strider comes back, you go to a 6-man rotation. Chuck McMillan, if Ozuna comes close to matching his numbers from last season, do we give him a qualifying offer? And if so, would he take it? It's a good question. I haven't necessarily thought about this one as much with the qualifying offer. And I don't believe he's gotten one before, but I need to double check that. The qualifying offer now, a little over $20 million, likely will go up a little bit more next year. So you might be looking at a qualifying offer of around $22 million for 1 year. That's a pretty big price tag for a DH only player, even one that is as good as Ozuna has been. I think you offer it to him. I think you offer it to him, and I think you're okay either way. If he accepts it, okay, it comes back. You got another really good middle of the order bat. If he doesn't, you get the draft pick, and it frees up that money to go out and do something. Look, if they're staying under the tax this year, and it's looking like that might happen, as I said in a previous episode, if you're going to do that, you better spend very aggressively next offseason. And so to not give a qualifying offer for $22 million or whatever it's going to be for one of the best DHs in all of baseball, one of the best hitters in baseball the last 2 years, that would be extremely cheap, in my opinion. Even if you feel like Drake Baldwin needs those at-bats. If you feel like Drake Baldwin is blocked because, let's say Sean Murphy comes back this year, has a really good season, there's not a clear path for Drake Baldwin, but you like Drake Baldwin, he's killing it at AAA. You want to get him more at-bats, but you can't see a way to do that because Sean Murphy's playing well. He's the veteran catcher. You want out there most of the time. Would you not bring Ozuna back because of Drake Baldwin? I don't know that that's the smart decision. And look, Drake Baldwin may be the next big thing. He may be another Ozuna type, although I don't think he's necessarily going to get to the 30, 40 home run range. Maybe he's got big power. I wouldn't put it past him. But Ozuna can do it, and Ozuna can do it at the big league level. You worry about the Drake Baldwin situation, another time. But as I think about it now, and this may change obviously throughout the season if something were to happen, but I think as we sit here right now, I think you have to give him that qualifying offer, because getting him back for 1 year, $22 million, that's not a bad deal for a guy that's been a really good hitter for the last 2 years. And if you don't get him back and he turns it down and signs somewhere else, then you still get the draft pick out of it. So I think it's a win-win situation for the Braves by giving him that qualifying offer. Ecuadorman, hey, Jake, who do you trust at leadoff before Acuña comes back? Is it Michael Harris, Ozzy Albies, or maybe Profar, or is it somebody else entirely? And what would be the best option in your opinion? This is a good question again here, Ecuadorman, who's in the chat with me live here as we talk. I've said multiple times, I don't think Michael Harris and Ozzy Albies are good top of the order bats. Their swing profile just doesn't fit well for what I generally want at the top of the order. Yes, I want them there because of their speed, but I more so than anything, especially with the strength of the middle of your order, is to hit for power and hit home runs. I think it's more important to have guys at the top of the order that can get on base. And so for me, I think the best lineup until Acuña comes back might be Profar, Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, Albies, Michael Harris, Murphy, Jared Kelenic, and Arcia. And I know that doesn't sound traditional necessarily, but you got Profar, a switch hitter at the top, who is going to get on base. Even if you don't buy into the swing changes last year that made him a really good player, he's always been able to get on base. Then you got Riley, who's also can get on base. And look, he's a better base runner than many give him credit for. And then you got Ozuna, who we just talked about, one of the best hitters in all of baseball the last 2 years. And then you got Olsen as your cleanup hitter, which I think is where he belongs. And then you get to Albies and Michael Harris, who, again, really good hitters and have good power. They just don't get on base enough. It does put some speed in the middle of your order. I think the only reason to put an Albies or a Michael Harris at the top of the order is just because you want speed. But for me, I would love both. That's why Acuña is the best fit. But for me, more than anything, it's about getting guys on base for Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, and even Albies and Michael Harris, who I consider to be more power guys than I do on base and really even speed guys. I mean, neither one of those guys are stealing so far. I think they have the potential, are stealing 30 bases a year. So I don't know that the benefit of putting them up there is as great. Now, one thing that they do is they put the ball in play. If you wanted to go profar and then maybe a Michael Harris and an Albies based on a righty-lefty, obviously a righty's on the mound, putting Michael Harris toward the top of the lineup. If a lefty, put an Ozzy up there. I think that makes sense. And you could do it based on matchups and put one of them either in the leadoff spot or the 2-hole and basically just platoon them at the top of the order. I've said that Brian Snitker should do that for years behind Acuña, put either Harris or Albies up there based on the matchup and who's starting that day. But there's certainly options. Either way, it's a deep lineup. I mean, even if you went Michael Harris at the top against a righty and then Profar, Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, but at that point, you're pushing either Olsen or Ozuna down to the 5 spot in the order. And I like the matchups of one of them coming up in the first inning better to give you that big blast in the first inning. So again, I think it's fine either way. I think what this should hopefully show you is that even without Acuña, this lineup is still really good and it's still really, really deep. And when he comes back, it's just going to be even deeper. So I don't necessarily think there's any bad options. It's just the thing that's always gotten me with Michael Harris and Ozzy Albies is that it's more so when we talk about the 2-hole, is that those guys just don't get on base enough. And I think for what this lineup is built to do, which is power, extra base hits, I want guys at the top of the order that are going to get on base. And it's why they put Olsen in the 2-hole before as well, because of his ability to walk. But I think he's settled more into that cleanup hitter 4-5 spot in the order, just kind of depending on where his bat is, because it's a bat that can come and go at times. I think Snitker's going to have to be a little bit more flexible with his lineups this year and kind of play the matchups a little bit more, play the hot hand a little bit more, something that he has been hesitant to do in the past. But I think right now I would probably just stack it with on-base guys at the top and go with a Profar, Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, Albies, Michael Harris. I've said for a while, I think Ozzy and Michael, just because of their profile, they fit better in the middle portion of the lineup in the 5-6 spot in the order. So that's what I would do. But I understand those who want to put that speed at the top with Michael Harris and Ozzy Albies, and I don't think that's a bad way to go about it either. All right. Well, that was just a couple of the questions that we have. We have a lot more to get to on today's episode, a lot more questions to answer, including, is Spencer Strider still a top of the rotation pitcher? Should we still be considering him as a top of the rotation arm? We'll discuss that here next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. You can go to FanDuel.com right now and look at the odds out there for Major League Baseball World Series odds. The Braves still have the third best odds behind the Dodgers and the Yankees to win the World Series this year. They have awards odds as well, win totals, who makes the playoffs, home runs, a lot more over there. You can check out on FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. We'll be back on Monday giving you an update from some of the actual baseball action happening this weekend as the Braves 2 spring training games will happen this weekend. And we'll also get into our Minors Monday segment. So looking forward to that. We'll be looking at the five top prospects to watch in spring training. So it'll be a fun episode on Mondays. Again, we're back to 5 episodes a week now through spring training and the rest of the regular season. So really excited. A lot of content coming your way here on the podcast. All right, let's jump back into the questions now, as I've only answered 3 of the 12 so far. Caden Hurd, hey Jake, if you could choose to add one of the big 3 pitchers, who would you add to the rotation and why? Whenever I get asked this question, it's always the same thing for me, and it's John Smoltz. Because, yes, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, they're all 3 Hall of Famers, but I think many people would maybe consider those 2 to be better than John Smoltz overall. But when I look at what when I look at today's environment too, I'm not saying Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine could not still do what they did in today's environment, but it is a different environment in baseball that we are playing in today, where it is all about strikeouts on the pitching side and it's all about home runs on the offensive side. And I just think John Smoltz, with his dominant ability, his ability to go out and get those swings and misses and get those strikeouts, I think it's better suited for today's game. And I think it's also better suited for the postseason. And so if I could only take one of the big 3, the answer for me is generally John Smoltz, just because I think he has the more dominant stuff that will play up in this type of era in baseball where there's so much swing and miss, there's so many strikeouts. I think that John Smoltz would be the best fit for this Braves team, who is also, I think, in more need of guys once they get to the postseason. And again, that's not that Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine weren't good postseason pitchers, but John Smoltz, one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. So Smoltz is always the answer for me in that question. Caden Hurd, hey Jake, sorry, already read that one. Sethan says, are you tired of answering the same questions? I'm not, because we have different listeners all the time, and I can always go different ways with some of these answers as well. So continue to submit these questions. Isaac Rayfield says, excluding the big 3 of Freddie, Dansby, and Fried. There's another big 3. I don't think that was the big 3 that we were talking about, that Caden was asking about. But Isaac says, excluding the big 3 of Freddie, Dansby, and Fried, who is the departure that the Braves have missed the most, whether it's on the field or off the field? Also, my bad for not getting the question count to 20 last week. The streak is over. Yeah, and it's just going down. It's getting even worse, Isaac. So I blame you. We got even fewer questions this week. So I read this question wrong earlier. I thought you were asking which of the big 3 that they missed the most, and I was going to say Dansby, just because I think most people would probably say Freddie, but you've gotten really good production out of Matt Olson without Freddie. The drop-off in production at shortstop, while I'm okay with the Braves not giving Dansby the contract that the Cubs gave him, I thought that was a ridiculous overpay. I do think out of those 3 that the Braves have seen go away, and Freddie, Dansby, and Fried, I think Dansby is the one they missed the most, just because of his leadership. It's Gold Glove defense. Not that Arcia is bad, but he's also going to give you more offense than Arcia has mostly given you over the last couple of years. But that was not the question. You asked, outside of those 3, who is the biggest departure that the Braves have missed the most? We won't really know until this year, but it could be a Travis d'Arnaud or a Charlie Morton. We'll see what happens with the catching. I said the other day, I think the Braves catching position is a position I feel the best about, but certainly Travis d'Arnaud was, beyond what you saw on the field, and a big clubhouse leader. Charlie Morton, that as well, on the pitching side of things. I think Travis d'Arnaud might be the departure that the Braves missed the most, but it not so much for what you see on the field, if that makes sense. I can't think of any departure recently that they've really missed on the field outside of the big 3 that you were excluding for this exercise, if you read the question correctly. I can't think of anybody that's departed in the last several years, the last 3 or 4 years, that the Braves necessarily missed their production on the field. But I think off the field, Ron Washington was top of mind. I think you were mainly talking about position players here, but Ron Washington and just his influence and impact on the team and in the clubhouse, and Travis d'Arnaud, I think are going to be the two that when you look back, maybe when you look back at this run, if things don't, turn around and Braves don't win another World Series, don't have another deep run or something like that, I think those might be the two guys that this team ends up missing the most. And again, it's not necessarily for on-field production, because when you talk about on-field production, that the Braves miss, I think it has to be one of those big three that you mentioned, because outside of that, I think there's still really good production all around the diamond for the Braves. But I think it's more so the guys that they're going to miss for off the field, what they brought to the clubhouse. And so that's why I probably will say Travis d'Arnaud, because I can't think of anybody else. William Contreras, somebody mentioned William Contreras. Certainly that is a tough departure, but I'm also a big believer in Sean Murphy. Now, seeing what has happened the last couple of years, would love to have William Contreras back for that bat. So yeah, that's probably a good one too, William Contreras departure, but that was a trade, so I wasn't really thinking about that one too much. But yeah, William Contreras is certainly one that has gotten away. Something of a scientist. If Arcia continues to struggle at the plate, how long would it take for the Braves to make a change and try Nacho or Nick Allen as the starter? This is a good question, and I know it's a question that many Braves fans are wondering and asking, is if Arcia has a 45 WRC plus in the first 2 months, even if he's playing Gold Glove caliber defense, which Orlando Arcia is a good defender at shortstop. Do not get me wrong. He's right inside the top 10 defensively in shortstop. He's not a Gold Glove winner. As far as I can remember, I don't think he's ever even been a Gold Glove finalist. But he is an above average defender. But how long does that overcome being an automatic out at the bottom of the order? And I talked about this going into spring training and doing our spring training preview. If Nacho Alvarez could come into spring training, or not even necessarily to spring training, but go into the year at AAA and show that he can be, and maybe he already has shown this. I have not watched enough of Nacho Alvarez at AAA to know. But if he can just show that he can be average defensively, he can make all the routine plays, and or you at least hope that he can give you something at the plate. Let's say he can hit 270 and get on base 325, 330, hit double-digit home runs. Maybe it's more 10 to 15 outside of, and Arcia can give you 15 to 20. I don't know. I say all that to say I don't know. The Braves seem to love Arcia. They've certainly have given him a pretty long leash there. But I'd have to imagine that we get towards the All-Star break, and I know that seems like a long time, but we get towards the All-Star break, we get into the month of June, and he is still rating as one of the worst hitters in all of baseball like he was last year. I think you got to make a move at that point, especially if Nacho is putting up the numbers that he did at AAA last year. You're seeing, improvement for him defensively. I think you got to give him a chance. Nick Allen, I think Nacho gets the chance before Nick Allen. I think Nick Allen is just there in case something happens in the middle of a game, or if Orlando Arcia or Ozzy Albies is out for a short period of time. Nick Allen can at least come in and handle a spot defensively. It's honestly the David Fletcher profile, and what I think David Fletcher was brought over for before all the, gambling stuff that's going on. I think that's what Nick Allen is. He is coming in because he can handle a spot defensively and he can put the ball in play, but you don't really want him there for a long period of time. If the idea here is that we're giving up on Arcia, we're pulling the cord, we're going to try something different, then it's a move to Nacho. It's not a move to Nick Allen, in my opinion. Same thing if Arcia or Albies were to get hurt for a long period of time, it's not, hey, let's insert Nick Allen for months at a time. I don't think that's what the Rays want. It's, okay, let's give Nacho this opportunity. But I think it would have to be 2+ months of Orlando Arcia looking like one of the worst hitters in baseball before the Braves would finally pull the plug. All right, I got about 3 or 4 more questions to get to on today's episode. We'll jump back into those questions and finish things up here next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, with each 1 ounce serving having 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for those busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk, prepping for the podcast, on a road trip, or going to drop off the kids. They're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. Get snackin and crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachio.com to learn more. Let's wrap things up here with the last couple of questions that we have. Even with only having 12, I'm going to be up against the clock here at the end, but that's okay. Caden Hurd, another one here. I knew there was another question from Caden in here. Looking ahead to next year's free agency, who is one high level and one high tier rotation piece you would add for this scenario? No one signs an extension. Well, I assume you're just talking about free agents. So they're just signing as free agent deals here. If I'm understanding the question correctly and how I'm interpreting it, what high level pitcher would the Braves be looking to target for the rotation? I still think it's a Dylan Cease. I know it's a Boris client, but he fits that mold as a workhorse that the Braves apparently were willing to spend big on for Aaron Nola. So I got to imagine that you would for Dylan Cease. If not him, Michael King is an arm that I like. Both of the Padres guys are my 2 top targets for next year that I think the Braves would go after. Do I think they're going to sign either one? No, because it's one of those things. Until they do it, I'm not going to believe it. But if you could have an offseason next year, if you're saving money and getting under the tax this year to spend big next offseason, then sign Bo Bichette, sign Dylan Cease, and let's go win a World Series. That would be my hope for next offseason. Sam Volan, why do you think all these Braves podcasters are so doom and gloom about the Braves and the offseason they had? I thought it was a solid, and these smaller pods I've seen seem negative about it. I honestly don't know. I don't get a chance to listen to a lot of podcasters out there. I know there's a ton of great podcasts for the Atlanta Braves. I haven't seen a lot of doom and gloom from many podcasters out there. Certainly not many of the big media members. I think it's more just frustration than anything. I don't know that and again, I don't listen to every podcast. I don't have the time, that kind of time. I don't know anybody, any podcaster or any media member out there that doesn't think this Braves team is good enough to win this year. The only kind of, I don't want to say doom and gloom, because like I said, I don't think anybody believes this team can't win, but I think doom and gloom towards the offseason is just a frustration that here you are in a window to win and compete, and all the boxes weren't filled. You had a need of addressing the outfield, which they did. You had a need of addressing the back of the rotation, which they didn't. And once the Joe Jimenez thing happened, you certainly had a need to address the bullpen, and you didn't. So they only filled 1 of 3 holes this offseason, and that's just frustrating as a fan. And look, a lot of podcasters out there like myself, we are ultimately fans of this team. And so you're probably just hearing some frustration that this front office didn't do everything that they could have done this offseason to set this team up for success. That being said, as I and many others have also come to the same conclusion, I still think this team can win a World Series. I think they're talented enough to win a World Series. So I can't speak for every podcaster out there because there are so many Braves podcasts and so many good ones as well. And that's why I always appreciate anybody who comes and listens to me talk about Braves baseball, because there are a lot of good Braves podcasts out there. But I don't know that anybody that doesn't think this team isn't good enough to win this year. Anybody doing a podcast, there's always going to be, those people out there that are just so pessimistic. They think this team is done and writing them off already. But I don't know of any podcast or anybody in the media that doesn't think this Braves team can't win this year. Jason Hensley, could trading for Nolan Arenado, putting him back at shortstop, be an option? We might lose some defense, but gain a lot with the bat. No, I think Nolan Arenado is still owed a lot of money. that the Braves just aren't going to take on, even if it is mostly a salary dump by the Cardinals. And then, as you mentioned, the drop-off defensively, and I honestly don't know if you're getting too much of an upgrade offensively. Yeah, Arenado set to make $32 million in 2025, $5 million of that being paid by the Rockies, 27 in 2026, with $5 million of that being paid by the Rockies, and $15 million in 2027. Now, it's possible that the Cards eat a good bit of money in that. I still don't think it's worth it. And Arenado's in declining both defensively and offensively. I just don't think that it's worth it. He's gone from in the past, he had a 774 OPS in 2023, 719 OPS last year. He's going into his age 34 season. I'm out on that idea. Bob says Strider has 1 year of excellent production and 2 elbow surgeries, yet we act as if he is the next coming of Nolan Ryan. I say pump the brakes. What say you? I say put the foot on the pedal, because I love Spencer Strider. And there's a reason why many going into 2023 thought he was the NL Cy Young favorite, because he can be a very dominant pitcher. Now, we got to see what he looks like coming back, but I just trust in Spencer Strider. He's a very smart, intelligent, pitcher. And I think he's going to do whatever it takes to get back. So you can pump the brakes a little bit, because we got to see what he looks like coming back from injury. But I'm very confident in Spencer Strider. Still a young guy, very smart pitcher. I think he's going to figure it out and find a way to succeed. And last question from Jeremy Vincent. Assuming we are without Acuña and Strider for all of April, what is the likely record of the Braves entering May with the given schedule we are up against for April? What win-loss record in April would warrant concerns? So let's take a look at the Braves schedule just real quickly here, because it is a pretty tough schedule to begin the season for the Atlanta Braves. They start the year with 4 in San Diego. Who knows what San Diego is going to look like, but I still think they're going to be a pretty good team, and certainly a good rotation that they have now with Cease and King and Pivetta and Darvish that you're likely going to see in those first 4 games. Those are going to be some tough matchups. And then you go to the Dodgers for 3 games. So that's a very tough trip to begin the year, where honestly, you might be happy coming home with 3 wins out of that trip. Then you do get the Marlins at home, but then you play the Phillies. You go to Tampa Bay, don't know what that's going to look like in a new stadium. You play the Blue Jays, who are at least hoping to be winners to begin the year. We'll see what happens. Then you go to the Twins, who are the favorite in the AL Central. The Cardinals, I don't know what the Cardinals are going to be doing either. But then you go to Arizona, who I think is going to be a really good team. And then you do finish the month of April at Colorado. So it's a pretty difficult schedule to begin the year without your 2 best players. A number of wins, I'll say, I don't know. Can't do the math in my head to say what exactly the record would be. Anything less than, I think, 13 wins, sorry. Anything less than 13 wins, I don't say concerned. It'd put themselves in a deficit, one that they could certainly overcome with a lot of the season still in front of them. But anything less than 13 wins, I would conservatively predict 16 to 17 wins in the start of the season through the month of April. I would predict 16 to 17 wins, but anything less than 13 wins, I think would be pretty troublesome. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Andrew Ash, excited to see how Hires works with Murphy on his swing. Murphy seems to overswing and looks uncomfortable. I think a lot of that last year, I'm not trying to blame it all on the injury, but it is a violent swing, certainly. And I don't think he was ever comfortable last year, but I think it had a lot to do because of the swing or because of the injury. But it is a very violent swing. Another question just came in from Jordan Griff, says, assuming he makes the rotation, what does Ian Anderson's leash look like considering he is out of options? If he comes up here and he's walking 3 or 4 a game, he's going to be out of the rotation. You just can't keep doing that and getting away with it. So I think, if he's coming in, walking 3 to 4 batters a game, consistently struggling to make it through 5 innings, I think that's the bad possible outcome for Ian Anderson that we could see. Ecuadorman 13 is my favorite number, but definitely need at least 17 or 18. I agree with that. Miguel Fria, Mets and Phillies are better teams than the Braves. Alex Anthopoulos didn't add on starting pitching, no relievers. You can make an argument for them being the better teams. I don't agree with that, but certainly they are good teams. AJ Evans, Buck Farmer leading us to glory. Todd Willie, if all the Braves comes out of their 2024 slump, will Jape give credit to an actual coach, the new hitting coach? No, just to kind of go against your comment there, because they are good players. And we kind of touched on this on the podcast yesterday too. I think those guys just getting back to who they are, I think it's more than reasonable. But I am excited to see what Tim Hires can do with these guys, and excited to see what, hopefully help get them back on track. I don't think Kevin Seitzer just became a bad coach. I think he's a really good hitting coach. Sometimes you just need a new voice, and that's what Tim Hires is going to be. Thank you all for joining me here today. BC, Jeffrey Humphreys, Laves coming in here as well. I appreciate it. Sethan, Chris Hester, King of Games. Thank you all for joining me on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. Have a great weekend enjoying some Braves spring training baseball. We'll talk to you again on Monday.